friends, how are you? Welcome to Changing Tracks. Today we have Sister Agnes with us. How are you? You're very welcome to our program.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your childhood, where you're from?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Sister Agnes. My full name is Sister Agnes Mary of the Holy Eucharist, and I'm with the Franciscan Sisters of the Renewal. I'm originally from Jacksonville, Florida, and I grew up here at Assumption Parish and went to Assumption Grade School, Bishop Kenny High School. I've been a sister now for 18 years and entered 2001. Up in New York, Bronx, New York, and it was right before actually September 11th happened. So I know I'll be talking a little bit more about my story, but I just was so convinced that that was God's will for me, that there was such peace and joy of being up in New York, even in the midst of everything that was going on with 9/11, with September 11th at that time. So,
can you tell us a little bit about your family?
Yeah, so I just grew up in a very normal Catholic family. I'm one of 5 children, and I'm the second oldest. We would go to Mass on Sundays. My parents were hardworking and were very generous and sacrificial in their love for us. And I think it was through their example and their love that really planted seeds of my vocation. And they always just encouraged us to do whatever would make us happy in life and whatever God wanted for our life. Actually, vocation never came up, surprisingly. But I think because they weren't pushy at all, it just gave us that freedom to really be open to whatever God wanted for my life. And I grew up as young as 8 years old playing tennis. So my dad would take me out, we would play tennis. Once a week he would take me out for a little lesson, and I started taking lessons. And that became a big part of my life gradually. Was very athletic, played some other sports, but eventually that really became my focus, was playing tennis, probably about high school. And I went to Catholic grade school and high school, received the sacraments. Prayer for me wasn't very deep. I didn't have a relationship with Jesus in my heart. I knew about Jesus from school, but didn't really have this deeper relationship with him. It was just your typical grade school and high school kid growing up.
What was your idea of happiness? Did it have anything to do with God, or was it more based on sports? What was your idea of happiness?
Yeah, it was not based on God. And actually, I was trying to fill the void in my heart that makes us happy, that's meant for God, with a lot of things and people. It was in what I did and how well I did it. It was in my friends. It was in how I was playing tennis. It was... I did well in school, tennis became more and more a part of my life, and it was a little bit later on that this all began to change for me. So in college, I was playing tennis very seriously. I got a tennis scholarship in college and was really... Actually, I should backtrack a little bit. It was in high school, I had an experience of an awakening in my faith, and I began to realize God had given me so many gifts in my life. And I remember being on a retreat when I was 16 years old, typical high school student, and on this retreat, we were given a time of silence to go and just be with the Lord. And I remember walking in the woods at this retreat center. And it was in prayer and in that silence that I got in touch with the Father's love for me. It was just overwhelming, and I began to tear up and cry of just gratitude. And I really felt like that was the beginning of a relationship with God the Father. And so after that experience in high school, it didn't really take. So I was still trying to find my happiness in the friends and in the high school scene, even going to Catholic high school. Unfortunately, there was a lot of partying going on and just going the way of the world. And so I was living these two lives. I would work these retreats, and then I would live this other life, and thinking that's what would make me happy. I was kind of running after that to fill that void in my heart. And so when I went off to college on a tennis scholarship, I really didn't have a really good foundation there, and began running again and looking for that happiness and people and things. So, yeah.
What type of friends did you have? How did they influence you?
Yeah, so growing up, the image of myself, I put a lot in what people thought of me and my friends. And so the friends I had in high school, like that experience of that retreat, I made friends in that, but then very quickly those friendships weren't very deep. And these same friends, we would have parties and do things together when the parents weren't home. And so it was like not good friendships. At that time, they weren't very deep. Whereas some other friendships were. And we were just, teenagers and really not making good decisions at that time. Thankfully, I got in trouble a lot of times, and this kept me on the straight and narrow, and it was very good for me.
Maybe you already mentioned it a little bit. What was the biggest danger for you at that time in your spiritual life?
Yeah, I think the biggest danger at that time was the party scene that I was getting caught up in high school. And some of those friendships that were first based on the Lord, but not very deep. And just getting caught up in that scene. I think that was that. But then also tennis in a way, because tennis became my life. It was later on in college when I had a knee injury. I tore my ACL my freshman year that everything changed for me.
After you graduated from high school, how was the change of going into college? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so in college, it was the first time I was living outside of like a Catholic environment. I went to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, had my family, my Catholic friends, even though we would still have partying at times and things. I would go to Mass on Sunday, and the sacraments, confession, it was just kind of whenever we went with grade school and high school. I didn't really understand the deeper meaning there. And so in college, when I was living on my own at that time, I started questioning life and what life was all about. Why was I trying to be good? Why did I need to go to the Catholic Church? Just questioning a lot. And so I just kind of went more and more to the scene of the party scene in college and playing tennis, and that became my whole environment. And so when I tore my ACL my freshman year, everything changed at that point. And it was like, I felt like the lost sheep that Jesus came and sought out and broke the leg and put on his shoulders, because I've heard that before, that the shepherd actually, to bring the sheep back into the fold, to get them to come, would have to like fracture the leg and then put the sheep on his shoulders and bring the sheep back. And I felt like, not at that time, but looking back, it was almost like the Lord allowed that to happen to wake me up. And so it was through that knee injury, I moved back at home. I was a freshman in college, and I was stripped of tennis. I was stripped of my friends. I was stripped of the partying, and was really asking the question, who am I, Lord, and who are you? And which I found out later, that was a prayer St. Francis would pray. And so it was on, I had my surgery on Good Friday, and it was Holy Thursday night. I was with my family right before the surgery, praying that prayer in front of our Lord in the Holy Eucharist, which is so beautiful being in this chapel sharing this story right now, that I was there on Holy Thursday night, praying that prayer, Lord, who am I and who are you? And wanting to know the answer to that question, because I was trying to find that happiness in a lot of things and people. And it was through that, and then the surgery on Good Friday, that I began to go to Jesus to really find my happiness. And how that happened is I met a group of Christians at that time that had joy. They had real joy. And I wanted the joy that they had. And I realized, well, I knew about Jesus, but I didn't really know him in my heart. And in order to get to know him, how would I do that? And it would be through reading the scriptures and reading specifically the Gospels. And so that gave me the grace every day to like get up and find joy in my life, was beginning to read about Jesus's life in the Gospels. And I began to grow in really a friendship with him.
Did confession take on a new meaning for you then?
Yeah, I wish at that point, but unfortunately, it took another conversion. So St. Francis, he had all these little moments. So I kind of in my own life have had these little mini conversions through my life. So this was kind of like a wake-up call where I was really lost, and the Lord took me and put me on his shoulders and brought me back to the fold. Well, you'd think that would be it and done. Well, no. So because at that time too, being an athlete, I recovered from my knee injury. I was playing tennis again. My life was about Jesus, and I was wanting to witness to Christ, but it became not in the Catholic Church. And so I was known as the Christian. I didn't want people to know me as being Catholic. I started wondering, like, does it matter what church you went to as long as you were Christian? And so what happened is this is crazy, but I totally left the church. I really questioned everything about my Catholic faith. And I left the Catholic Church to the point of becoming anti-Catholic.
What do you owe that to? Was it peer pressure from friends, or you just put everything into question?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of just questioning the faith and not finding the answers in the right places and going to the right people to ask the right questions or the right resources. So I was kind of like, if you have a problem with your teeth, you go to the dentist, you don't go to the foot doctor. So I was not going to the right resources. And I was trying to find my answers on my own about the faith. And so, yes, I was looking in scripture, but we know we need scripture and tradition. So that's what I was missing. And so through just searching, and I was sincerely searching for truth and searching for the Lord, but not in all the right places. And so as I was becoming more and more radically giving my life to Christ, in fact, it was so funny at the time, I was dating someone else, and he would have nightmares of me becoming a nun. And I said, no, I would never become a nun because I don't believe everything the Catholic Church believes. But that's where I was at the time, because I think a lot of people don't like the Catholic Church for what they misunderstand it what they think it believes or stands for. And so I just misunderstood a lot of what I thought I believed as a Catholic. So what happened is, after I went through really giving up a lot to be, I was thinking about being a missionary for a non-denominational athletic group and bringing the gospel that way. It was through my parents' prayers, really, that brought me back in the Eucharist, that brought me back to the Catholic Church and the sacraments. And what happened is my parents, I remember one Sunday morning having the nerve. I was living at home now. I was a senior in college. I was tennis. I had recovered and witnessing to Jesus on the tennis court, got my nursing degree. I was living back at home and just saving up some money. And I told my mom one Sunday morning, I'm not going to Catholic church with you this morning. And she hit the roof. Of course, like the nerve that I had to tell her that I was on a Sunday morning not going to go to Mass with her because I didn't believe everything that the Catholic Church believes. And so she and my father began to pray for me. And they were so good, they were patient, and they began to put Catholic literature on my bed. And were just like open if I ever wanted to talk. And it was another good friend from the parish, too, that was giving my parents a lot of this really good Catholic literature from the parish. And I read the book, Rome, Sweet Home. And that book, I realized I had such a Protestant thinking of the Catholic Church that book changed. It helped me to understand a lot of what I misunderstood of Catholicism. And then, it was through a video that my parents also gave me, Miracles of the Eucharist, that brought me back.
What would you say to a person who has doubts about the Catholic faith? Where should they look for help?
Yeah, I would say Jesus in the Eucharist, where else can you go? Like, he's there, truly present in the whole Eucharist, and that's where, once I realized that Jesus was present in the whole Eucharist, body, blood, soul, and divinity, that it was like, I can't go anywhere else. He's here in the Catholic Church. And yes, there's going to be priests, religious, Catholics that will be maybe not good examples, but our foundation is in Jesus, and Jesus founded this church. The Catholic Church is the first church that he founded. He came to bring salvation, but he also came to establish the kingdom of heaven, the church here on earth. And so I've experienced living my Catholic faith just growing leaps and bounds so much more than in other religions and other faiths. It's such a treasure that you just want everyone to know and understand and love, because it's got such riches for us.
So what happened next? You started reading the books that your parents left in your bed. For example, Rome, Sweet Home. Who is that by?
So that's by Scott Hahn. Rome, Sweet Home is a great book by a Catholic scripture scholar. And the way he writes and speaks, it really helped me to understand my Catholic faith better. But then the real clincher was watching the video, Miracles of the Eucharist. And it was by this couple, Bob and Penny Lord. They've since both deceased. I call them my spiritual grandparents. And they are, this video, it is the most undramatic video. It's not like your great videos that you put on here. But one of the sisters said when they saw one of these videos, they said, "Sister, you must have been so ripe for conversion for this to have been how you had your conversion." So I was watching it, and it was about different miracles of the Eucharist. And one miracle in Orvieto, Italy, a priest who didn't believe in the true presence of Jesus in the Holy Eucharist at Mass began, at the consecration, the host began to bleed onto the altar cloth. And at that moment, when I saw that miracle, I knew the Jesus who I've come to know and love through the scriptures is truly present in the Holy Eucharist and truly present in the Catholic Church. This is truly Jesus. Where else can I go? This is the true church. And so from that moment, it was like scales falling from my eyes of like St. Paul, because I really had such a Protestant thinking, and I really was anti-Catholic.
Is this the point where confession and the sacraments started to play a big role in your life?
Yeah, so this was right when the sacraments played a very big role in my life. So once the scales fell from my eyes and I realized that this was the true church, I started going back to the sacrament. So I went back to confession. It had been a long time. I remember being on a retreat and going back to confession. I started going to daily Mass, started going to reading anything I could on my Catholic faith, got involved with youth ministry, young adult ministry. I was like a sponge. And I'm not even a big reader, and I started reading everything I could on the Catholic faith. I just wanted to learn more and grow more, and I just couldn't get enough. And I wanted to go on any kind of retreat when I was kind of like a retreat junkie. One retreat after the next. But I think too, this might have been my religious vocation coming out, all this ministry and desire to give. Because at this point too, I was working as a nurse. So I did get my nursing degree. I was coaching tennis on the side. I had finished college, and I was working as a pediatric nurse oncologist, which is a pediatric nurse for children with cancer. And I had gotten involved with that actually because my sister had been very sick with lupus and had gotten chemotherapy for that. And so I got to know the floor where I began to work on through a lot of her own illness and the cross that she carried as a young person. And so I began to get work there as a nurse's aide, and then later on worked as a nurse.
When did you feel the call to religious life?
Yeah, the religious call, when did that come? So for me, you know, I never thought about a religious vocation as a young person, which is that's unusual. I think for most people, I think their call, they have inklings of it growing up. For me, it came later. And I think because I had a misunderstanding of a sister. I had a stereotype that you became a sister if you couldn't get married. That's terrible. That's so bad. So I thought, no, I'm gonna get married, I'm gonna have children, I'm gonna have a family. So that's terrible. And I thought sisters weren't happy. I didn't really understand what it meant to be a religious sister. So the first time it came to my mind was after my conversion. I went to our young adult group, and there I was. I had already been going to it and going to the sacraments regularly, going to adoration and daily mass. There I was in my jean skirt and trendy flowered blouse, sitting there, and a sister came to share about being the bride of Christ. And she was young, and she went to my high school. I knew her, and she talked about being the bride of Christ and sweeping the chapel for Jesus. And I began to cry, and I thought, that is so beautiful, Lord. If you want me to do that, I want that. And I thought, I want to be married, but I also want to be your spouse. So Lord, what do you want for my life? So I was 22 at the time, and I began to be open to a religious call. It was the first time I really thought about it. And I began to do what you should not do in discernment, which is I would date and discern at the same time. So I would date someone, and then I would feel restless, and I would actually talk about my discernment with them. And then I would break up, and then I would go visit a convent, and I wouldn't be there, and I'd think I wasn't called. And then I would just back and forth. So I do not recommend that. And actually one day when I was watching EWTN, there was some sisters on EWTN. I was watching this one late morning, and someone called in and said, should you date and discern at the same time? And I'm like there listening so closely. And the sister says, seek the kingdom of heaven first. And I knew I needed to stop dating, and I needed to see, Lord, are you calling me to be your bride? And so I knew if I didn't settle that question, I would never know. So I went on a pilgrimage to our Blessed Mother. At that point, I prayed a rosary novena before going on pilgrimage. Like I said, 54 days rosary novena. And I think that's why Satan wanted to steal the rosary from me and plant those lies of that it was idol worship. No, she's our mother, and she loves us, and she prays for us, and she wants us to be close to Jesus. So I prayed this 54-day rosary novena, and I started it on the Feast of St. Joseph, and I ended on Easter, and I left on pilgrimage to Our Lady. And it was there on Divine Mercy Sunday, after making a general confession of my whole life, that I felt our Lord calling me to be his bride. And so what happened is it was after Mass, and I was praying the stations, walking up this mountain, and I said, the priest at the end of my general confession, he said to me, how urgent do you feel like you need to make a decision of your vocation? And I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, a 9 out of impatience. I just need to know. So he said, when you leave here, I want you to decide what you're going to do for 6 months. And you might be right or wrong, but just try it. So I said, okay. Every day I think, it's got to be married life, because that's going to be the greatest sacrifice, because I want to be praying all the time. And I'd have no peace. So I'm like thinking of the sacrifice that I can do for Jesus. So each day I keep thinking, no, it's got to be married life. Finally, the last day on Divine Mercy Sunday, it was at Mass, and the priest gives a homily about someone who has a headache, and they go to the doctor, and they're like, I don't know what's wrong. And the doctor says, well, what are you doing? And the person says, well, I'm fasting, I'm doing all these penances, I'm doing all-night vigils. And the doctor says to him, it sounds like to me you have a case of your halo being on too tight. And I realize at that moment, I'm thinking of the sacrifice I can do for the Lord, and not the joy and desire in my heart. And so as I walked up the mountain praying the Stations of the Cross after that Mass, I said, okay, I'll try religious life. hear that reluctance, that's terrible, but the Lord will take anything. And I cracked the door open a little, and peace rushed in, and joy in my heart. This is what I've been calling you to. And I remember thinking, it's like he's been proposing to me and proposing to me and proposing to me, and I haven't been listening. And I just knew, and I started crying, and then I doubted it. Oh my goodness, boy, did I doubt it. And I came back and I talked to my spiritual director, and he confirmed it. Thank God. Good spiritual director. But what was I going to do? Now I had no more vacation time. I was working as a pediatric oncology nurse. I had no more vacation time to go look at orders, like to go enter somewhere for a year. So I felt the Lord calling me to quit my job as a nurse, not even knowing if I was definitely called and where he was calling me to. And my spiritual director, I went to my spiritual director, and he said, yeah, I think that's a great idea. So I quit my job. I talked to my parents. I thought my parents are going to be shocked. And I remember the day I told them, and they were not surprised. And they were very supportive. And my father, he's very practical. He's an accountant, and I thought he would think it wasn't very prudent that I was going to quit my job, not knowing, but he was very supportive, and they let me live at home. So I quit my job in May as a pediatric oncology nurse, and then I started visiting orders. For 5 weeks, I came to New York. And I had heard about our community because my spiritual director knew of the sisters, because one of the brothers had entered our friars, and he had been his spiritual director. So I went to visit the sisters, and when I visited our order, I just knew, and I had such peace and joy and clarity that I had a call and that it was there. And yeah, just such clarity. And then I thought, why doesn't everybody want to do this? But it's a call.
What would you say to a person who is experiencing that restlessness? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say seek the kingdom of heaven first, and pray, pray, pray. When I asked a religious sister one time when I was discerning, can you give me a word of advice? And she said, pray, pray, pray. So if you're in the sacraments and you're living a life of grace, trust that the Lord will lead you. Get a spiritual director, and just keep going through the next open door.
Thank you for joining us today, Sister Agnes. Thank you for sharing your testimony with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's always a joy to talk about your own call, because it reawakens that desire and joy that's in your heart, and that's only gone deeper since being a sister.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Friends, pray, pray, pray. Receive the sacraments and be in the state of grace. There's no secret. Sometimes it seems that being a Catholic is a long list of rules that are impossible to keep. Well, it's not. Thank you. Thanks for being there. Thanks for watching.